Hi, I'm Tom Farley from recovery.com, and I'm here to talk about my journey and what I have learned about isolation and connection. In the end, I want you to know that there's a place where fear and stigma is eliminated and understanding can grow and help can be found. I'll start with a story. It was 1996. I was working in New York, Wall Street financial services kind of role. And I got a phone call, and it was my little brother who had come into town in New York that day. Chris had just spent 5 years on Saturday Night Live and went off to Los Angeles to make movies, and he was back in town. And he called me up. He said, "Tommy, let's have dinner." And I said, "I'd love to have dinner." So he said, "Come down, meet me in my hotel room suite at the Waldorf Astoria, just a couple of blocks from my office on Park Avenue." So 5 o'clock rolls along. I walk down to my little brother's suite, but still feeling like, I'm this cocky New York, Georgetown grad, king of the world. I'm wearing a suit. I got everything I need. And I show up at my little brother's suite, and he's there with another guy. And he said, "Tommy, give me a second. This is a producer of my next movie. We got to talk about it, but just, hang out and we'll go get dinner." So I did. I sat down and I picked up a magazine and I started reading it. And I immediately started thinking, like, how did this happen? How did my sitting in my little brother's suite at the Waldorf Astoria? I was thinking about like how we grew up in Wisconsin. Our parents sent us away to summer camp, 7 weeks, all boys. And there was a time where every Sunday they would take the Catholic boys and they would put us on a bus and send us into town to go to church. And we loved that because that was the only time we got to see the girls from the girls' camp across the lake. And I remember this one time we were going up to communion. Chris was in front of me, and I don't know where he found them because you're not supposed to have candy at camp, but he had Tic Tacs apparently, and he put them all in his mouth. And as we're walking up and going by all the girls from the girls' camp, Chris starts weaving. And, because the Mass is outdoors, Wisconsin, under the pines, August heat. And he looks like he's going to faint, and he goes down. And he slaps his hand on the bench seating. Head goes back, spits out all the Tic Tacs like they're teeth. And all the girls in the girls' camp goes, "Oh, that's so gross." And they're just shocked by that. All my friends are laughing, and I'm saying, don't laugh. It's not funny. I mean, it was hysterical. But I couldn't admit it. I was the older brother. And then I thought, like, just having to go to high school with this guy in the building. I was a senior, he was a sophomore. Just the level of anxiety I had constantly, it was daily life. I'm thinking of all these things and just shaking my head. And I look up from my chair in the suite at Chris, and Chris and this guy are looking at me. And I'm like, "Oh, it's kind of weird." I just go back to my magazine, and a few minutes later, I get up to go get a bottle of water, and I'm walking back to my chair, and Chris and this guy are following me everywhere, watching every move. And I sit down and try to ignore that, and they're working. And a few minutes later, again, it gets silent again in the room, and I look up, and Chris and this guy are looking at me, the whole same thing. And I go, "Hang on, wait a minute. What's going on here?" And Chris goes, "Well, we're doing a movie. There's a producer of my movie, and I play this younger brother of this guy that's running for governor of the state of Washington. I play his knucklehead brother trying to get him elected, which became the movie Black Sheep." And the producer came to me and said, "Chris, we have a problem." And Chris goes, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, we're casting the movie, and we're trying to figure out what the serious, uptight older brother of you would look like." And Chris said, I'll have him here in 5 minutes. And that's when he called me to come to have dinner. That's what life with Chris was like. But the interesting thing, and it took me years to figure this out, was that all my life I was trying to be somebody. I was trying to, and it looked to the world like I was the uptight, serious older brother, but I thought I needed to be somebody, and the world wanted me to be that person. I tried so hard to be that person. And here's my little brother who's known for characters that he created, but just being himself. And I had it backwards, and I struggled with that. So, midway in my journey, I actually thought about, one of the stories I thought about for myself was how I used to be in a room surrounded by people, center of attention, making everyone laugh, and yet not feeling more like I was standing on the surface of the moon. I felt this isn't me, but I'm getting all this connection. Everyone wants me to be that person. And so I said, okay, if that's what they want, I'll give it to them. But I felt bad about it. And the only way I knew how to manage that feeling was numbing myself in very unsafe and unhealthy ways. And that was my journey. And then there was the event when Chris, died of this disease. And I was very fortunate when that happened. I did something very unlike, my family and the way I was brought up. I just realized I needed to talk about it. And that's what I did. The pain and the loss was so much that I'm like, I can't do this alone. So I went out and I went into schools and I was telling Chris's story. And I probably helped a lot of people. But during that time, I was still struggling, and I would go to 12-step meetings, and it was just like it was in my family. I could point to somebody across the room and say, like we did with Chris, well, I'm not that bad. I guess I'm okay. And we did that with Chris. And not only did we do that, but we couldn't help Chris as much as we wanted to because we were fearful about being honest about our own issues. And so I would go into these meetings, and that was my barometer. That person's worse than me. And so I would leave, and I would have long bouts of sobriety only to just come back to when things got either too bad or I was feeling too good about it. I went back to what I knew, it's drinking. And so I finally found recovery, and I was very fortunate that somebody I knew brought me into a meeting and said, and this is somebody that helps so many people in our community, how do you say no to that person? I couldn't do it alone. I needed somebody I needed help to make that last step. And I was very fortunate, instead of, listening to somebody and saying that person's, worse than I am, I heard it differently this time. I have had broken relationships like that person. I've had job loss like that person. This has nothing to do with being sober. I just needed the clarity of sobriety to work on all these things. I started hearing things like rigorous honesty, gratitude, humility. And it dawned on me that the person I was putting out to the world could never be those things because it wasn't a real person. Only I could be rigorously honest or grateful or even humble. And the more I worked on that, the more I started to find this authentic self. And I couldn't do it alone. I needed others. I needed to be in an environment where I could honestly talk about these things. And it had to be an environment of trust, an environment of acceptance, which you can't do alone. So that's where I found recovery. And the more vulnerable I became, actually, the less painful it became, because I was surrounded by people, and I learned that I was eliminating fear. I was eliminating all the self-doubt that was keeping me in isolation. So. And then I did something completely different that I had started out. Instead of telling somebody else's story, I was telling my story. And people were connecting to that. I was getting connection, which is something I always wanted. People were connecting to that. And I realized that we tell our stories, as I love to say, because we cannot heal in isolation. We need the connection that recovery brings. And so the journey continues, and I become different. Different person all along that journey. I get new tools. Here's some of those tools that I learned in recovery. The first one was serenity. We talk a lot about serenity, the serenity prayer, but I didn't know what that means. It was just words. I had to feel it. And the one thing I learned how to do that was in my car. I wouldn't say I was a road rager, but I was a very aggressive kind of, I learned it in driving New York. So I had to really figure that out. And what I did was I just started planting myself in the slow lane. And when the car went whizzing by me at 90 miles an hour, where I used to get competitive and how dare you, I would just say, that's okay. I'm going to get to where I'm going. I can't control that. I can only control my speed. And something amazing happened. I started to feel differently. And that's when I'm like, is that serenity? That's what that must mean. I had to feel it. I had to feel it first. The other thing was the whole thing about gratitude. I was going through life, not seeing these little things that I could be grateful for. Because my mind was always going, light speed ahead, trying to, control the future and my role in it. And when I stopped and started making little gratitudes, it made all the difference. It put me in this present state. And I understood what gratitude was. Also just, I've always been a social person, and I still am a social person, but now I understand the difference between an authentic self and somebody I'm creating for the masses. And when I'm out in public and I start feeling myself being that person, because that's where everyone wants me to go, I know what to do now. I have tools. I can call somebody. I need to find connection. I need to find help getting back to that authentic self. And being able to stop myself from being that was great. Continuing to practice rigorous honesty, not just honesty, rigorous honesty with myself. And the thing is, when people start seeing you being honest with yourself first, they're going to trust you as somebody that they can be around. They have to see it, and you have to model it for them first. So, I guess basically the last thing I talk about in recovery, two things. The first thing I always look at the difference between recovery and treatment is that treatment, you find yourself, you're in the middle of the pool drowning, and treatment just gets you to the side of the pool. But if you don't continue to work on getting out of the pool, learning to swim, whatever, you're going to float back into the middle. So it needs to be, not just, saving your life from this disease, but also now how are you going to live your life? So that was the first thing. The other thing I looked at was, I tell people that are going into recovery, what I found, recovery is like a gate. Recovery is a gate where you do all this work and all this knowledge. People have told you should go into treatment or recovery. You've done the research. You don't feel good. You do all this work and you finally say, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And you get right up to that last step before you go into recovery. And the way our minds go, you're like, I know what my life's going to be like if I take this last step, and you freeze because you're fearful of what this means. Fear just stops you cold. And what I tell people is, do you know what's on the other side of that gate? The same fear. You're not avoiding any of it. It's life. Am I happier because I'm in recovery? Not necessarily, sometimes. Do I have less financial insecurities? No, that's life. But what I do notice that on that side of the gate, life was getting better. And it was never going to get better where I was before. That's the promise of recovery. And I guess the final part in my journey was finding this place here in my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin called recovery.com. So here I am at this global resource called recovery.com, that is helping people find treatment, but also live in recovery. All of this, wonderful content that is life-changing. So if you really want to find the right place for you in this treatment and recovery space, all I can say is recovery.com.